Serious, what are the "I had a toxic childhood" signs people show later in adulthood? Number 1 is definitely apologizing for everything all of the time. Other stuff includes inability to maintain eye contact. Failing to voice a stance on something, even if they know they're right. Social anxiety. Depression. Self-isolation, etc. PTSD. Personal experience and actually diagnosed. I saw a couple in the supermarket buying a gallon of Neapolitan ice cream, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry. I am 42 years old and started crying in the middle of a Walmart about ice cream. I had a flashback to all the times my mother bitched me out for only eating the chocolate side. But I was deathly allergic to strawberry. She always bought it and always punished me for not eating it. Oversharing. I was basically a feral child. So no one cared what I was doing. I told pretty much everyone everything about me just to have someone give a until I was 30. Unfortunately, now anyone who liked me telling them everything now thinks I hate them because I actually have some privacy. But now I can tell everything to my therapist and everyone else can practice minding their own business. Fear of maintaining relationships. Occasionally dropping off the face of the planet when friends you really care about start getting too close. Feeling suspicious or obligated when someone does something nice. When things are okay. Or even more intensely good. There is a feeling of impending doom and waiting for the other shoe to drop. I know in my case, and I suspect others too. Watch for people who seem too functional, you know. She aces all her classes. She smashes it at the gym. Her home is always ridiculously clean. She excels at everything. She more than likely sets high standards for herself and then self-loathes when she doesn't meet them. She never feels like she's enough. Apologizing too much and being completely avoidant or too clingy in relationships. Also true in my case. Will refuse to have children in case they turn out like their abusive parents and abuse their kids. The sad thing is most errant, but it's how we see things. Clinging to people because you know that they are going to leave at some point. A really odd one I noticed with one of my friends was giving everything away or not accepting things. They'd always say, "Oh, I don't deserve this," or if I looked at something they had and went, "Oh, that's cool," they always offered it. Saying, "Oh, you'd probably get more use from it, no matter what." He told me he never really cared what he got because it was always taken by his family, so he didn't mind having nothing. Noticed the same behavior with a few friends and I, but couldn't understand if it the same reason or something else. As one who grew up in one, it is serious self-doubt. Never thinking I can do anything right or even doing anything at all. Growing up, my mom never thought anyone could do anything right except her, and I mean anything in that sense. If she asked you to get her a cutlery and rinse it before bringing, she would go back and rinse it herself, with the excuse that you missed a spot. It was really that bad. Even as an adult, I still get told I didn't do something well even though others have praised my ability to do that thing. I never used to do anything unless I absolutely have to 'cause I felt I wasn't good at anything or I won't do it well. Although I have started working on it, I still have my bad days. One thing that has really helped is doing things without telling her. Imagine applying for a job and even before you go for the interview you are already being asked if you can cope with a job. I just do my things and tell her afterwards. This has really helped me in some weird way. Persistent. Internalized feelings of shame about who they are. Difficulties with maintaining relationships. Either being too clingy and needy and burning people out. Or the opposite. Never being able to be close to someone. Swinging back and forth between the two is also a sign. Dissociation. Not usually distinct other identities, but more like often losing time. Not realizing how you ended up somewhere. Spacing out a lot, usually because something has triggered an upsetting memory. Emotional dysregulation. Essentially, having unusual emotional responses to things. So, crying over something that isn't objectively sad but brings up sad feelings for you. Laughing or having no response to something really upsetting, etc. Not being able to access your feelings to know how you feel about a situation you're in. Very low self-esteem, self-worth. Distrust of others. As assumption that you are unlovable and will always be left behind. Constant tension. Sore muscles from being physically tense. Often jumpy, if they must sit within sight of an exit and with their back to the wall. And still jump. Or always seem to be watching everyone around them. Someone who survived a toxic childhood will often have a very different image of themselves than anyone else has. Someone who is pretty or average may believe that they are hideous. A kind, caring person will call themselves selfish, horrible, etc. They are also often very good at reading other people's feelings or emotions, and have strong, inexplicable impressions of other people that are usually, not necessarily always, right. These are broad overviews. All these things stem from toxic childhoods. Children internalize everything that happens to them. And they learn, like any prisoner, to notice when their adults are in particular moods. What sets them off, and what calms them down. All of these traits were incredibly useful, even life-saving, at some point for a child. The problem is when that child becomes an adult and is safe, but doesn't know how to be a person in a safe place. And they bring their old coping behaviors with them. Because that's all they know in order to survive. ETA. There's also a lot of behavioral extremes. Being overly cautious to overly lax. Or having objectively weird standards of safe, unsafe. For example, sitting in a restaurant where you don't know everyone is unsafe and triggers a panic response and/or dissociation. And yet feeling it is perfectly reasonable to walk through a park alone at night. Awkward hugs. Being afraid of other people finding out about your successes because you think they'll mock you for them. My dad always does. So why shouldn't everyone else? Not knowing how to be comforting towards upset people or accept any comforting gestures from others. Good intention don't make up for the general emotional cluelessness. My friend is a victim of this, and what I've noticed is that he never tells anyone if he is in serious danger. A few weeks ago he was at major risk of COVID and we weren't sure if he had it or not. He didn't tell anybody until after he was cleared. Results came back negative though. He also doesn't know how to accept gifts. It's like he's never gotten one before. He just kinda stares at it awkwardly and says thanks. And then feels obliged to get you something too. Like I know he appreciates it, but I just think it's unfamiliar territory for him. There are many degrees of maladjusted behavior. I think the most bewildering people are the ones who grew up in undeniably messed up family situations, if you happen to just know this about them. But with great effort they manage to put together up front so that they look very average, ordinary, well-adjusted, and push onward and upward to a shiny, happy life. By appearances they do. Then you scratch beneath the surface, and voila! Their private home life is just as much of a dysfunctional mess as whatever they grew up with. They don't know how to invent a happy home life for real. They end up recreating the mess that they're familiar with. But outwardly, to the community, in public, everything's fantastic and constantly coming up roses. Some people act out. But some people internalize. Or develop pathological part-time amnesia. IDK. I have terrible self-confidence. I've worked hard on it, but it's never really going to go away. I'll probably always default to seeking validation from others. I can control it now. To the degree that it isn't really detrimental anymore. But it creeps in. I think what I recognize in other people is a certain cynicism. It can come out in a lot of ways. But it's there. It's the old "the abyss stares back at you" aphorism. You saw or heard or felt or understood some things some people never do. Way too young. And it stayed with you. But that's a good metaphor too. I'm in my early 30s. And engaged to someone who had a good childhood. She isn't constantly expecting criticism and anger. Or to be abandoned or humiliated. She knows what a happy family looks like. She's watched her parents fight and work the problem out. There is an optimism to her. Like, underneath it all. She believes in positive outcomes. We don't have that. We can only be pleasantly surprised. And always vigilant. Always expecting something bad to happen. It's just there. And you can tell. I feel like I can just see it written all over people at this point. There are higher levels of sadness. Regret, anger, all of these fairly negative emotions. Important ones. But negative ones. In us. And that creates an imbalance in the system and gives those emotions an elevated position in the hierarchy of feelings. Default mode is not content, happy, or even, well, even, or neutral. We can put those vibes out. But that doesn't mean that's what's happening under the surface. And most people can't tell. But for a lot of us, we can see that there is another layer. Outwardly you can be whoever you want. But internally, you are permanently operating in the red and you'll have to overcompensate in ways other people don't. And I think you can see that on a person if you know how to look. TLDR. Depression and existential angst. Bags and wrinkles under the eyes. But not like, super literally. Here are some symptoms. 1. Self-sabotage. Being afraid of being successful. Getting intimate or showing vulnerability. 2. More likely to submit to peer pressure or abusive relationships or more likely to isolate themselves because they think they aren't worthy of your attention. 3. People that get angry very quickly or different ways in which the individual gets overwhelmed easily. 4. Substance abuse. I had a best friend who had been thoroughly conditioned to be submissive. Act pleasant. Never cause conflict. And please everyone around her at all times. As a result, when something is said to her, her brain receives it and automatically generates whatever the person wants to hear as a result. I had been friends with her an embarrassingly long time before I finally connected all the dots and realized our closeness was manufactured because whatever I said, she would reword and parrot back to me in agreement. It's crazy how good she is at intuitively picking up on conversational or social cues to embellish an opinion to make it seem like her own. E.g., we'd have long, in-depth talks about a movie or TV series we were both passionate about only for me to find out later that she'd never seen it. If 5 people ask her to do something on the same day at the same time, she will say yes to all of them and then run herself ragged trying to be in 5 places at once and cry when she ultimately fails. She fought hard as one of the first people in her family to go to college. Yet was almost willing to fail and drop out the weekend before the final exams because her sisters called and told her. Not asked. Told. That they'd decided she would spend the weekend cleaning their mom's house for Mother's Day. The last weekend before finals. And the last day to work on her senior project. Her parents live hours away. I begged and pleaded with her not to give up her future, but she saw no other alternative. The only way I was able to stop it was to call her mother myself and explain the situation. Intrusive of me maybe, but I knew how hard she'd worked to get there and didn't feel like I could let it slip away. If a person standing to one side of her expresses a far-right political opinion and the person next to her an opposing far-left one, she'll find a way to agree with both of them. She never has any money because she gives so much to her non-working family. But if you suggest seeing a movie or eating out and ask her if she's okay to do so financially, she'll assure you that she is. Even as her bank account spirals into the red and the overdrafts pile up. If she's mad, she won't let on. If you hurt her feelings, she'll never point it out. If you ask for her honest opinion, she'll never be anything but positive, even when you know she feels otherwise. After years and years of friendship, I learned her subtle tells when something was wrong. But she would never admit it or say what. I loved her. But this was what eventually drove us apart. You can't build and maintain a strong friendship on sweet-smelling lies. But that's what her upbringing conditioned her to believe that people want from her, and no amount of gentle coaxing and pleas for honest communication could convince her otherwise. She once admitted to me that she truly didn't know how to look inside herself and find out what her own opinions were. Her parents successfully built her personality to be a rose-colored mirror. It's so sad.